Okay, so we're live now. Okay, so let's jump into it. The they've been given permission to finish the drilling, correct? The Army has given the construction company permission.
The Army Corps of Engineers has posted that they will be approving it. The environmental impact study has not yet been completed, but we think it's just going to be a rubber stamp.
A rubber stamp?
Yeah.
Okay.
They had estimated that the environmental impact study could take up to 2 years. And as we can see from them posting the approval process, because that's part of the process, they have to post that they're going to approve it. So they have not yet approved it, but we anticipate that's what's going to happen. The Standing Rock Sioux Tribe is pursuing their recourses through the court of law.
Okay. Okay, I was gonna get on that midway through, but we could jump on that. The some of the elders are saying they want people to flood Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And that's to put pressure on the politicians, or what?
Yes. So the hope is that by bringing more attention to this and by being wise about it too, I fully support rallies and marches and people being active, but I'm hesitant to support things that might cause other people to. There was a car accident yesterday as a result of a blockade on Interstate 5 in Washington State, and so there was a car accident, and it's my understanding people were hurt, and so that's not the intent of the Standing Rock Protectors in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, someone was hurt during a protest there?
Because the highway was blocked and some people that couldn't see that the highway was not going, there was a car accident. And of course, that's no one's intent. Our intent is to spread the message in a good way and rally people to our cause, not away from it.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are against protesting, they're kind of using that, because I've seen videos of people getting ran over. They're kind of using that as a kind of scapegoat, like, oh, well, these people are out in the streets and protesting and they shouldn't be blocking traffic. But it's like, you can't just run people over. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Well, in North Dakota, and in other places as well, they're trying to pass laws saying it's okay to run over people blocking the roads, which of course is inhumane.
Yeah.
And for people to consider such laws really shows you the power of money.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you the power of privilege, and what a critical time we are in our in the history of the world, really.
And people will vote for this stuff until they're the ones protesting.
Yeah.
Or they lose, their job, or they're led, and they don't have healthy water to wash up their kids, and then they're out there. You know what I mean? So it's ridiculous. So they're trying to ask the court to halt access, drilling, and who it specifically is the court? Is this the Supreme Court or the?
Brian, do you know which court they're going through?
Federal court.
They're going through federal court in DC.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
The Federal District Court.
So did you hear that? Could you come up here, honey?
Oh, honey, I'm not dressed.
You don't have to be. Federal District Court in Washington, DC. So there you go. Another to pop back on our previous conversation there about people being run over by, or potentially it being made legal to run over people who are protesting. It's our First Amendment right. We have the freedom of assembly. We have freedom of speech, and all of our freedoms are under attack right now. So we need to, even if you don't agree with somebody protesting or standing up or marching or whatever, even if you don't agree with it, you have to agree that we need to support our U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, because I think the easiest way to understand is, until you're on that side, you can't really understand. Well, you should be able to put yourself in people's shoes, but it's, like you said, it's a right. It's a constitutional right, and
exactly.
You know, so okay, what about the vets? They're coming back. We talked about that briefly last video. How do you feel about that?
I'm actually quite excited about that. I think that the last time it wasn't as organized as it could have been. It wasn't what we had hoped it would be. And this time, I think that the people that are coming know what they're getting into. And the people that are welcoming them are making sure that they are taken care of in a good way. So I'm quite excited about it. I've seen some of the quotes from some of the veterans saying, look, it's our job to form a human shield and to protect people. And it's so reminiscent of our Cheyenne men at the Sand Creek Massacre, wherein we were being attacked by the U.S. Army November 29th, 1864 in Sand Creek, Colorado, along the Sand Creek. There's no town there. But our men, there were approximately 38 men and about 600 women, children, and elders at the camp. All the rest of the men had gone hunting, but they surrounded the women and everyone with their own bodies and protected them. So we see that the warriors, the veterans coming to Standing Rock, we see them and their goal is to do the same thing. Their goal is to protect our land against these powerful interests.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really exciting to see these veterans come to us in a good way and protecting us and supporting the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Now, I kind of want to go to a different. It's on topic, but I kind of want to go somewhere different than what we usually do. I want to talk about the people, and I mean the general population and their lack of urgency in this situation. Now, me personally, I feel that there is a lack of vision that the people have with connecting the dots, and I think people want to wait till it's too late to. Well, it's not affecting me, but they can't see the interconnectedness in events where, you know, well, first is going to be North Dakota, next is Wisconsin, then it's going to be Chicago, then it's already Detroit. I mean, it's kind of already happening, but it's like, well, what do you think is the responsible? Who or what do you think is responsible for this lack of urgency in these situations?
So the problem is that we're all wrapped up in our own little lives. We're taught as Americans that it's, everybody pulls themselves up by their own bootstraps. Everybody relies upon themselves, when we all know intrinsically nobody gets anywhere by themselves. There's an excellent video called On Red Ground. If you have not seen it, I urge you and your followers to check it out. There are clips of it on YouTube. And it's actually an experiment done by a filmmaker talking about issues that we face in the United States. And there's this particular clip called On Red Ground, wherein one of the participants confronts another and he says, look, nobody here made it on their own. You can't say you made it on your own. You're on red ground. You're on the bones of Native American people, and you're profiting off their land. And so it's really quite powerful, very passionate and eloquent speech by this participant. And it totally, how do I put this, summarizes the entire American experience. Nobody came over here with tons of gold and silver and quinine and corn and potatoes. Those were here. People came here and they took, and they're taking, and they're still taking today. Look at what Trump said about making people, or coming, he wants to come into our reservations and take our natural resources that are in the ground. Well, we have these little things called treaties. And we have this little thing called sovereignty.
Eminent domain and different.
Yeah. Eminent domain really pertains to land that's not tribal land. But you cannot just come into a reservation and go, I'm here, I'm going to take all the resources that are in the ground. You can't do that. So it's really ridiculous to make those statements and get companies excited about breaking the law, because treaties are the supreme law of the land. So I'd like to introduce you to my husband, Brian Patterson, who can you slide closer to me? I'll move this away.
Slide closer to my wife, absolutely.
Hey. Let's see here, let's move back a bit.
How you doing?
So,
Good.
Sam, this is Brian.
Hi, Sam.
How you doing? How you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you.
All right.
Okay. So Brian is a national leader. He's also the Bear Clan representative for the Oneida Nation Indian Men's Council. And Oneida Nation is a leader in Indian country in many areas. But I'm proud and pleased to introduce my husband to you, and so he can share his perspective as well.
Okay, go right ahead.
Really, Skanu, thank you for gathering what we call in our Haudenosaunee territories the power of the good mind, to engage in meaningful dialogue, to engage in meaningful dialogue that will lead and impact our generations forward, right? This is not an issue of Indian, non-Indian. It's an issue for humanity. It's an issue and it's a call to consciousness. It's a call to action. Certainly what befalls us as people today befalls all walks of life. Certainly our children will depend upon our best abilities to impact a meaningful future. However, our children will also inherit our inaction as well. So greetings, good to see you, and thank you for the opportunity to share a comment.
Oh, no problem. Now, this is, I think, our third or fourth video. Yeah. So he can, if you want to jump in and add something, he can, awesome. His opinions, or if he wants me to ask him a question, or, however he wants to do it.
Well, I think that it's I wanted to expand our conversation to include perspective from Brian as a national tribal leader. He's privy to conversations you and I might not be privy to.
Okay.
And to communiques that are going on behind the scenes. I was really excited to see that David Archambault, chairman of Standing Rock Sioux Nation, will be speaking at Cornell on
yeah.
We're going to go over and see him. The last time we saw him, he was speaking at USET. My husband had invited him to speak there to help rally people to his cause.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So what behind the scenes information are you able to tell? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's start. How does it work where I guess what is the likelihood, as far as from what you're hearing, that the drilling will stop? Is the community focused on, I mean, I know they're focused on stopping the drilling, but are they also preparing for stopping future other drillings elsewhere on tribal land also?
You know what, this is an issue for Indian people across border throughout our territories. I would say that the power of prayer, has really brought many peoples from all walks of life together, which leads me to believe that these are times of prophecy. These are historic times. And
you read my mind with that, because that was my next question.
So regardless, we're in a system, American Indians, we're in a system that is called the trust relationship. It's the government to government, nation to nation relationship. Throughout the years, that relationship has, well, let me back up a little. When my nation signed treaties with the founding fathers of this country, it was in exchange for our land, water, and resources. Promises were made. Promises were made along the lines of the health, safety, and welfare of the people. As the country progressed westward, those promises were also extended in treaty to the rest of the tribal nations as well. So when when we progress 200 plus years forward to today, the trust relationship becomes a one-sided relationship. It becomes a preliminary trust relationship. And we're working to bring that back to the original intention. Tribal leaders across the nation are engaged in a platform called trust modernization. In the trust modernization, well, the federal government, in manifesting their trust responsibility, they say that if there's a trust, there must be an asset. If there's an asset must be managed. And so the trust relationship has become a trust asset managed relationship. And so we're really trying to work to bring that back in focus. The numbers are out there that the natural resource, I believe 80% of the natural resources left in this country are within Indian territories. So we know there's been other actions, other land grabs. Last year, by example, I stood with the San Carlos Apache, the Yavapai Apache, is they look to protect Oak Flat. Oak Flat in San Carlos Apache territory was where their young women would go for their rites of passage since time immemorial. It's a sacred site. Well, Senator John McCain and others led an effort to bring a mining company based out of Australia that took federal lands, tribal trust lands, and handed them to this foreign mining company. And just like we see these pipelines coming forward, the Keystone Pipeline, Donald Trump has said he's going to fast track that and move that Keystone Pipeline. Well, you know what? That's by that example, that oil and resources will not even stay in this country. It won't benefit America. That oil, those other minerals, they're being exported out of this country. So it's a crying shame what is taking place throughout the world. As we look at the desecration of Mother Earth, it's a real telling time for people worldwide. Renee and I went down to Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago for the historic Woman's Rise, the Woman's March. And that was truly an exciting time to realize that that moment began with a single text message, a single call to action, and it manifested itself worldwide. I guess that is what we in Haudenosaunee refer to as the power of the good mind. That's a tenet of the good mind, call to action.
I got two questions before I forget. Okay. Last week, not last week, the last time we spoke, me and your wife spoke about, she informed me that the pipes were from Russia. And you're telling me that the mining was from Australia. What would be the purpose of outsourcing these companies to do the drilling and construction here?
It's all about a corporate mindset. There's no other interest, right?
Is it cheaper to use foreign businesses than a local mining company or something?
So if you look at the Keystone XL pipeline, it's tar sands oil from Canada that is too filthy, too foul for them to process in Canada, and too foul for them to transport across Canada. So their plan is to transport it across America down to the Gulf, where it'll be processed in a refinery on the Gulf, putting our land at risk. We take all the risk. Canada's not taking the risk. They're shipping it across our land. It'll be refined in Texas, and then it'll be shipped to China. Not one drop of that oil is going to be utilized in the United States. So unless people are involved and invested in that pipeline, there's no reason for it to come across American soil.
Mm-hmm. And okay, and we've already had an oil spill in the Gulf.
Yeah, and we just had one in the Yellowstone National Park.
Now, my next question was, what leverage does the Native community have as far as you were talking about trust? I don't think you can use that word, but if it's for the legal terms and things like that, but they've broken all these treaties and different things like that. Does the Native community have leverage? What leverage do they have to have some kind of power, because the government is untrustworthy as far as treaties and different things like that?
I think it was U.S. Supreme Court Justice Black in the 1800s who stated, "Great nations, like great men, should be people of their word." And certainly by our example here in Oneida Nation, every year we get annuity cloth, we get treaty cloth. Our elders have told us that even if that treaty cloth gets to the size of a postage stamp, you go and get that treaty cloth because you're holding that treaty in recognition with the federal government. So every year they send us this treaty cloth. Every year it gets smaller and smaller, but every year we still get it because it validates our treaty. It validates the words and commitments that this country has spoken to us. And while every treaty has been violated in principle and action, let me just retract that. Let me just say, every treaty this country has entered into with the American Indian people has been violated. We still hold up our end of those treaty obligations and push the federal government in its recognition. Our national tribal leaders are in Washington, D.C. this week. They're already in session with the National Congress of American Indian, and we will push. The problem is our numbers in Indian are so small that we don't represent a block of constituents that could influence a congressional representative. And so that's the real challenge for us, that the numbers are so small. That's what makes Stand with Standing Rock, standing in solidarity with folks from all walks of life, so vital for us. It's critical for Indian country to have the support of our allies.
Now, as I asked your wife earlier, I would like to get your perspective. Is there a quote, is there a parable or a saying about the people's lack of vision to become active when they see everything as an isolated incident and can't really see eventually it's going to come to their front door from that quote unquote isolated incident?
What I was going to say, we spoke about this earlier. There was a Syrian couple in the news recently, and they had voted for Donald Trump. And they had family members coming in from Syria who were stopped by the Muslim ban. And they were on the news, they were crying, they were distraught, and they said they had no idea this would stop their family members from coming in. That this vote, that they wanted tighter borders, they wanted more immigration control, but they weren't, as you were saying, they didn't look at the broader context. Yeah, you're voting for someone who's a racist, a misogynist, a sexist, a sexual predator. We elected a sexual predator as our commander-in-chief. All these things, and we knew this beforehand. We knew what he was when he got elected. We already knew. So people who voted for him, they have that onus upon them. They voted for this monster, and we all have to deal with it, and we all have to work towards the revolution, if you will. We have to rise up and stop it, his negative actions in as much as possible. And those include these pipelines that are all over the country. Different people, different nations are reaching out to Standing Rock and following their map of resistance against these pipelines. And I don't know if you've been following any of that, but it's happening all across the country. Did you want to say something? Our nation.
I'm sorry.
Did you want to add something to?
I think I was going to ask.
Did you want to say something?
Well, I'm not sure what's relevant to say. Indigenous people throughout the world, and I've been most recently to Bolivia. And in Bolivia, there's 37 different indigenous groups in that country alone. My point is that indigenous people throughout the world, that it is a time of prophecy for us. The Inuit people in the most northern Arctic Circle, has stated that the star world, the sky world, the star world has shifted. By example of Standing Rock, this movement, this call to engagement has united the great Sioux Nation, the 7 nations of the Sioux, the 7 nations that make up the great Sioux Nation. It's the first time they've gathered since the Battle of Greasy Grass. Spiritual leaders, all walks of life, are coming together in lifting their voice and resounding in the power of prayer. Welcome to the resistance. And I think it reminds me of an era from the 60s. I was born in the early 60s and led by the hand. And it was a very active time for Indian country in the 60s, as we were in what was called the termination era of Indian country. And from there, American Indians took over Alcatraz Island in California. They walked all the way from Washington State, from the coast, all the way to DC to bring call to action. There was all these different movements. Not only in Indian country, but in America as a whole, right? Power to the people. I remember the Black Panthers in the fist in the air, and we have our fist in the air today. So I think the strength and strategy is truly within the solidarity of us as peoples from all walks of life.
And you could definitely see that at Standing Rock. You could see people from all over the continent, all over the world, really, who came together and stood, like I mentioned before in our earlier conversations. People came from all walks of life and stood together and created a solidarity, a movement across the continent and across the world. We crossed oceans with this. Even the Pope spoke out for Standing Rock.
Yeah.
You know, you had religious leaders come together from all different faiths, and they walked at Standing Rock and they prayed at Standing Rock with us. The knowledge and understanding is for people such as you and I, that water is life. We're 72% water, and we cannot live without water. Thank you. Thank you. Now stop drinking it out of plastic and we'll be golden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got to work with what I got for now.
We've all bought into the big lie of you got to buy water. Well, we don't got to buy water unless we live in Flint, Michigan, right?
Well, Cleveland too is bad.
Yeah, Cleveland. All across the country, we need to be vigilant, and we need water kits, water testing kits ourselves in every community, so we can keep.
I interviewed the guy, Mark Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
I FaceTime interviewed him. He's the one that exposed the Flint, Michigan stuff. So we talk about the lead, and he basically said in my interview, and I'll quote, that any home basically that has lead piping in the front yard, like under, should have a lead filter. Any home in America, not Flint or Cleveland or the Bronx, or he said any home, period. Basically, everybody should have a lead filter. So he's like he was in Time magazine. He's like one of the leading world scientists on it. So it's definitely a serious issue. Yeah.
It is. If we want our children to have a future, we have to protect their brains.
Mm-hmm.
We have to protect them from brain damage from lead pipes.
Mm. Yeah. Now, this prophecy this isn't the Hopi prophecy you're referring to, is it?
There's Hopi, there's Pueblo prophecy. By example, in my territory here in upstate New York, our elders have told us to watch for the tree to die from the top down. And if you look clear across the country, even in the most remote places in the Americas, up in British Columbia, the trees are dying from the top down. If you look, the bees are dying, right? Every now and then we'll hear something on the news. The bees are dying.
Yeah.
Just perhaps 40 miles from where I sit in a cave, several years ago, they found bats with a fungus on their face. And these bats, they call it white-faced bat syndrome. White-faced bat syndrome, because anything white will kill you. And so that's a tongue-in-cheek joke here. White salt, white sugar, white flour, anything white will kill you. And that's something us Indians have known for 400 years. But my point here is the white-faced bat syndrome is now nationwide. And so our pollinators are dying, right? If the bees die, what do we got? 8 years left? 8 years of life. How are we gonna feed and care for ourselves? So it's not a question of if a pipeline breaks, it's when a pipeline breaks. Just like you mentioned, the what was it called? Horizon in the Gulf that broke. Yeah. So it's not if, it's when they break. And what's crazy about this pipeline, Dakota Access Pipeline, as well as Keystone, is it runs through the heartland of America. This is the breadbasket of America. If we pollute that watershed, and how are we going to feed ourselves? How are we going to care for ourselves? We have to change. We have to have a basic call to consciousness. It affects all of humanity.
I got two quick comments. Okay, there was a I can't remember the exact movie. It was a YouTube video, and in Japan, the scientist did a study and is doing research, and basically, he's saying that the forest heals cancer. Just from being in the forest for a long amount of time, just being in nature, it heals ailments, it heals diseases. So, but we're destroying that, and I don't, that doesn't make any sense to me. And also, what is the end result of the prophecy? Like, what is
the prophecy? Speak of another realm. They speak of most often the fourth realm, that the earth has been cleansed in the past. They speak of a fourth realm for
another flood,
for floods, fire.
Oh no!
And so, in my prophecy, it doesn't say what will happen. It will, but what it does say is that we will go back to the ground from whence we came for 7 spans. I don't know if that means 7 generations or 7 years. I kind of believe it means 7 generations. But if you look, by example, the Mayan calendar has ended. The long count has ended. It's another time. Just like those Arctic people, those Inuit people in the Arctic Circle has said, the star world has moved and shifted. It's a different time, and we just need to be prepared the best we can as a people. Water is life. Water is the source of all life. And if we don't have clean water, good luck. You can't drink oil.
And clean. If you look at the trees, if you look at the Amazon rainforest and how quickly we're causing deforestation down there, those are the lungs. And the trees are the lungs of Mother Earth. And we have to have them in order to have oxygen. So as simple as that. I post up on my Facebook page of quite frequently, trees are the answer. Go plant a tree. I tell my friends that it's vital that we understand our connection to the earth. If you look at, there's a study that came out, I believe last year, about the importance of children playing outside, like you mentioned, in the forest or in a park. Children learn better. They are calmer. And there was another study that came out about how people with depression are benefited by being outside in park-like settings and in forests. So those are things that call to us subconsciously, and they call to us on a visceral level. We need that time within nature. We don't need to, live in our modern caves all the time. We need to be outside. We had a snowstorm here today, and there was a little break in the snow, and I told my husband, I said, hey, let's go for a walk. So we're walking through the snow, and I'm really trying to step in his steps because the snow is about a foot deep. And, it was just so enervating to be outside. And we actually live in the land where there was an Oneida village here for over 150 years, one of their longest villages, longest occupied village. And so we actually benefit from that land. And when we walk on the land, I think of his ancestors here and how people lived here and loved here. And I'm sure the bones of his ancestors are here as well. You don't live for 150 years in one area without taking care of those who pass on. So I think of all those people being here and how we are borrowing this land, as many of our tribes say, we're borrowing this land from our children, our great-grandchildren, and the 7 generations to come. We don't own the land. That's such a European concept. We don't live forever, so you can't own something that you don't live forever. You can't own the air. You can't really, it's such a bizarre concept when you really think about it. So
and I think subconsciously we worship nature.
yes.
And I think we don't really realize it because soon as the weather breaks, the first thing people want to do is go to the park.
Yes.
And they want to go to the park because it's sunny, and it's like it's a connection with nature that they're having, but subconsciously they don't even realize it. They're just like, oh, I just want to go to the park. But that's you responding to your body to,
Yes.
you know what I mean? So how can we prepare for the prophecy? That's now, because I'm concerned, because I'm thinking about floods and natural disasters now. So how do we prepare?
And with climate change, there's more coming. We know these things from our teachings. We call our law, the natural law, the great law. That's the great law, the sustaining law. It has kept our people since time immemorial. If you don't, to illustrate your point, hold a gun in your hand and look how your body reacts to that. Go out, touch a tree, hug a tree, hold a fruit in your hand and see how your body reacts to that. Everything has an energy in this life. If we do not raise our consciousness, if we do not embolden peoples from all walks of life with these teachings, with this awareness, this consciousness, the good news is more is coming, right? More tornadoes, more floods, the rising waters. Look at we mentioned Japan. Fukushima is leaking like crazy. Fukushima is worse than anybody is talking about. The salmon in the Pacific Northwest are already affected from the current, right, of Fukushima and the radiation that's in the water. Times are changing. All I can say to you is, have access to clean, cold water. I hear our elders teach us all the time. In the Pacific Northwest, I believe it's Ms. Pierce, elder, says, choosh, always have clean, cold water. In the morning, when you lift your head from the pillow and you take your morning drink of water, lift your head and rejoice and give thanksgiving for that water. A simple word of thanksgiving. Creator knows our minds and our hearts. And while sometimes it gets it's a tough time here on this path we travel on Mother Earth, I believe Creator blesses and rewards those that has suffered, that live in a good way.
So since we're talking about, oh, go ahead.
So I always tell people, always live near clean water. I've been telling people that for years. I encountered a woman once, just a random encounter. We started a conversation and she was talking about how she wanted to move to Phoenix. And I've lived in Phoenix. And the amount of fresh water you get there is very minimal. And what if something happens, right? What if the power goes out? How are those millions of people going to survive without fresh water? So live somewhere where you have access to clean water. Learn how to grow food, even if it's just in your apartment. There are a lot of, you can make those pallet gardens, you can hang them on your wall.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of things to educate yourself, because having food is going to become a very big problem in my mind, in my estimation, and in what I see coming. Know how to grow your own food, know how to survive without power, know how to protect yourself.
Turn your cell phones off for 2 hours and try not to go crazy. I think people should. That's a good start.
Exactly. And when's the last time, Sam, when's the last time that you walked barefoot, besides it being winter and not being able to? But when's the last time you walked on Mother
The summertime. I do it in the summer because I'm right across the street from the Lake Erie.
Oh, great.
So,
great.
yeah, I do.
Did you mention Cleveland?
Mm-hmm.
The land of LeBron James. But you know what? I remember as a child, that river was on fire. They couldn't put your river out in Cleveland. It's crazy times.
Yeah.
So Vine Deloria Jr., one of our widely considered to be the preeminent Native scholar of all time, was once asked when he was doing a presentation, was actually told, well, you guys didn't deserve the land because you weren't utilizing it properly. And he looked at him, he goes, you know what? You're right. We never would have thought of a flaming river.
Yeah, I have a video, the biggest video on my channel. It has like 20,000 something views, I think now. And I interviewed a Black Trump supporter because the RNC was here. And if you look at the comments on the YouTube page, he's basically talking to people that are against Trump, and they're saying, they get into this discussion about the natives and the land, and he's saying, well, they didn't know what to do with it, and he's like that. And then when you read the comments, not everybody, but a lot of people are saying there were civil wars here. They were fighting amongst each other, and they were, a lot of bloodshed, and it was primitive. That word primitive, they like to throw around. And it's like, well, what does that have to do with giving people disease on blankets? And, so.
Yeah, if you want to talk about early germ warfare, it started here on American soil, American Indian soil. It started here on our continent when they gave us infected blankets infected with smallpox, so that they could wipe out our villages, so they could steal our land and steal our resources. So that's a fact. That's not me making it up and going, oh, I'm anti this, anti that. I'm not anti anything other than I'm anti people being more concerned with money than they are with the future of our planet.
You know what? Even before the colonization of America, even before the non-Indians came and set up colonies, and the conquistadors came in the South, even before that time, they brought with them their livestock, like pigs, the swine, and swine epidemic wiped us out. One person with smallpox just rippled and devastated the first people. We call ourselves Ungwehoweka, the original people. And I believe Creator created 4 beings of people. And the original being was what we say today is American Indian. But the disease just really wiped us out. I know with my people, we lost 2/3 of our nation population just to smallpox alone. I wasn't sure where I was going to go with that. There's a great book out, 1491, and it'll give you a feel of this land. There were millions and millions of people here throughout the Americas, the hemispheric Americas. Trade and commerce was alive and well. Hey, look, those Mayans built temples that are still standing. We had our engineers, we had our scientists. We knew that by growing corn, beans, and squash together, that they provide the nourishment in the soil, they provide support to one another, and they complement each other's growth. So they were what we call our sustainers in life. We call them the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. So the life in Americas was alive and well before disease got us.
My grandpa say that this was a pristine land. We had no diseases. We had no flu, no influenza, which is flu, smallpox, chickenpox, measles, mumps, rubella. We had none of that, not a bit. And so we were totally exposed when those things were brought over, and we were totally exposed when people brought alcohol, when people brought drugs, and they brought not just disease, but they also brought a way of life that was the antithesis of our way of life, which was the abuse of women. And they didn't, when they first came over here, they thought of women as chattel, right? Women didn't have any rights, they couldn't vote, they couldn't own property. Whereas the women of my husband's nation, they chose their leaders. The clan mothers, the women of the tribe of the nation were very powerful. My tribe, also matrilineal, also understood the power and strength of our women, strengthens our men as well. So when we're out of balance as a nation, and right now we're tilting badly, especially in terms of how we respect and disrespect our women. We don't respect our women, or 1 out of every 4 Native women, actually I think it's much higher, are subjected to sexual assault and rape. And it's 1 out of every 5 for our college age women. And why is it that a woman can't go to a party on campus and be safe? Because why should we have to fear our men? Our men should be our protectors. They should be our warriors. They should be the foundation for our communities. We should look to them for strength, not for fear.
It's like we're acting out the colonization all over again every day. Like it's, yeah, that's too deep. But I want to get back to the natural disaster stuff. How does your tribe look at, huh?
Yeah, because that's light and easy. You're like, that's too deep.
Well, we could talk about that in the next video. That's just, I know once I get started on that, it'll be hours. But as far as the natural disasters, how does the tribe view them? Because if you're saying there's more coming, from my perspective, if it's natural, it can't be a disaster.
Right.
It's
right. Our actions are accelerating that behavior, right? We're creating that imbalance in the world. Looking at Oklahoma in my wife's territory, 500 tornadoes, unheard of number of tornadoes that are occurring, right? The earthquakes.
Earthquakes are related to fracking, because there used to be minimal earthquakes, right? There used to be minimal earthquakes in Oklahoma, and now there are hundreds every single day, and they're directly tied to fracking. Mother Earth is not happy with us, and she's showing us that by what's going on.
Oh, you guys got low battery or something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Shoot.
My last question was kind of go back to women. I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but I guess putting more, I don't want to say women, let's say more morally conscious women into as elected officials would that help things? Because I know women have, you know, they may have a different, not a different, but more of a connection to the earth and different things like that. Is that, you know what I mean? Like they can relate, I don't want to say more, but at a more easier level than a probably typical male politician.
Can I just, can I try this one time? The women are the heartbeat of our nations, right? They're the givers of life. They're the holders of life. There's a reason why the earth is called Mother Earth. There's a reason why we know that the moon, who walks in a cycle, the moon in her cycle controls the most powerful element in the world, the waters, right? And that moon, we know that moon is not the man on the moon, it's Grandma Moon. It's Aksa Doda in my language, Aksa Doda for Grandma Moon. Shoot, even my language is a feminine language. When we want to we have to construct the original word to make it masculine. Our women were the title holders. They appointed our chiefs. They're the life givers. They're the heartbeat of our nations. In fact, my wife's people have a proverb, and they say, us warriors will only be defeated when our women are the warriors.
A nation is not conquered until the hearts of its women are on the ground.
Until what? The women are on the ground?
The hearts of the women are on the ground.
That's right. That's when us warriors will be defeated. You know what, indigenous women, let me just make this point. It's not so much relevant. It's a little bit off, but I need to make this, whoever's listening, whoever's your audience, indigenous women are going missing and murdered, and no one's speaking out. So much so, up in Canada, they have the missing and murdered indigenous women's highway. America should be outraged that this is going on. 1 in 3 women will suffer severe, Native women will suffer severe domestic abuse, sexual trauma. 1 in 4 will be raped. America should be outraged that this is occurring.
We'll talk about this in our next video, Sam. I'm sure that we will be speaking again, and we really appreciate you reaching out to us. And my battery is dying.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I got to do some editing too. Go ahead.
Just something to think about, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say tomorrow we drive to work, we come home from work, and we park our car. The next time you drive your car, you park it. It will take 20 years for the effects of those emissions to dissipate in our atmosphere. 20 years. And that's just from one action, right? So it's not only about Dakota Access Pipeline, it's about our collective consciousness of the human family. And what can we learn? The same fate awaits you and your children, awaits my family as well, my children, right? You and I, we can share blood, each other's blood, and keep us both alive. And one thing's for sure, for certain, we can share medicine. We can share clean, cold water, and it will keep us both alive, right? The same fate awaits us.
Mm-hmm. So thank you.
I got a lot to think about with this one.
Yeah. We're looking forward to your next list of questions, and the next time we can join you and your listeners.
Okay, and we said this last time. Hopefully, we'll have better news, but it's next time to get together. So,
Sam, should we expect any different when we put a man in the White House that still hasn't released his tax forms, a billionaire who has appointing billionaires on his cabinet? Should we expect anything different?
No.
Right? So, yeah.
All right. Well, y'all have a good night.
Well, thank you. Good to spend time with you. Good to see you.
As well.